Hey, on to the next spreadsheet that we have. We're going to take a look at the sales forecast, and again, really, we'll do a decent amount on this first page, and then the next page will pretty much fill in. Um, you can make some changes on it, sure, if you want to, but don't necessarily have to. The thing that you might change would be the growth rates that are very simple to change and make all the changes themselves. This one can sometimes cause us some difficulties, and I say that because sometimes you'll have if you were in a retail store, for example, you might have way more product lines than what we have here. And, that being the case, we got to kind of make some modifications or we got to try to make it fit. I'd also say that a couple of you kind of, had some business ideas that when I was talking about payroll, I forgot one of the options that really should and can occur on here. Um, and so that may be the case for some others of you. We'll see as I go through this. So again, if you had a hardware store, I mean, hardware stores have a gazillion different items, and what we might have to do is try to combine those into categories, right? Okay. Um, but generally speaking, let's say we were doing a coffee shop just for the heck of it. I don't know if anybody's doing a coffee shop. I don't think there was. Units, in this case, it doesn't really matter. Don't worry about the units up here. When we go to units sold down below, it makes a bit of a difference there, but it doesn't really matter up here. You could say it's by the cup or, glass or whatever. And again, here you might have, let's say, 3 different sizes, but we're also going to have lattes and frappuccinos and whatever, crappuccinos. I don't know what they sell at those places. I drink my coffee black and without anything in it and hot. So anyhow, if we had 3 different sizes, what we might have to do is just kind of average it, right? So maybe I'm going to sell it for $1.50. What's my cost of goods per unit? And this is where you need to do a little research, right? For a lot of you. You may, look it up. You can call a local person. Hey, what's it cost, for a cup of coffee? Maybe you can calculate it, right? You can go down and buy, or you can buy it through Amazon, a 3-pound bag of beans. You're going to grind them yourself. You put in X number of scoops, which is so many ounces, and on and on. It would not be that difficult to calculate it, okay? Um, my guess is a cup of coffee probably costs less than 50 cents, but I'll just put in 50 cents. So you make $1 per unit. Okay. Then you come down here and you can see the coffee came down here. And so, how many of those on average am I going to sell per month? That's what I want to put in here. Okay. And it's going to fill in all the rest of it for me. Well, let's see. I like to do this kind of, if I'm selling it, per day. Let's say I sell 20 of them per day, and I'm open 6 days a week. That'd be 120 per week times 4 weeks. There's a little more than 4 weeks, so that'd be 480. And maybe I could assume then that I'll do another 20, because there's a few more days. So 500 might not be an unreasonable number, right? So great. I'm making $1 per unit. I got 500. This is in maybe January. You might start on a different month, and that's fine. But I'll assume this is January. We can actually change those months. You can do that, I think, over here on the directions too. It tells you, starting month or starting year. Okay. And maybe I figure I'm going to do that for those 4 months. Summer months it might actually slow down a little bit. Maybe people, I don't know. I make my own coffee at home, so maybe it goes to 400 and through September, and then maybe we get back up to 500. So there we are. That's my coffees. Now, next line down, I might do crappuccinos or whatever the heck it might be, or mochas, or I don't even know. So, but I'm going to switch from coffees, and I'm going to go. I'll talk about maybe some of the other businesses. One business that a person might be doing is a auto repair shop and might have an employee. Well, geez, we got to think about this then, and so you may have, in that case, you may have parts, and I think oftentimes, they'll they mark up their parts only like 10%. I think it's kind of a fixed amount. What you'd want to do there then is just put this in at $1, sorry, and this in at 90 cents. Okay, so you're going to make 10 cents, per dollar of parts. And when you got down here to your units, I skipped one, so I'm down here. Then you got to estimate really what your dollar amount is going to be per month in parts. And that, that may be a little hard. I mean, there might be some months where you actually buy, some really expensive parts. Again, you're only making 10 cents, whatever that percentage may be, but you might just have to estimate then. So I might sell $20,000 actually worth of parts that would go through my shop. Okay, I make a margin of 2,000. Again, I'm making up numbers kind of as I go along. You guys should do more research. Okay, again, call an auto shop. Say how many dollars worth of parts, and is that your markup? Right? I expect that on this type of a project that you'll do a little bit of research like that. Okay, so parts, but then the other one that might come into play there, let's say I have an employee and they have a one slot or a bay, it'd be a bay that they would have where they're doing their mechanic work, and so I've got service. I'm just going to call it service, and it could be whatever. My units in this case is hours. My parts, it doesn't really matter what my units are, but my units in this case are going to be hours. And what usually happens, well, usually there's a shop rate, right? And so my shop rate might be $50 an hour, and I may pay my mechanic $30 an hour. Okay, I got to make sure though that I'm not doubling up here. Okay, make sure if I got my mechanic listed here, then I got to take them off over here. Now, this is a choice here. Okay, because this assumes that you're only going to pay your employee when they are actually generating money. Okay, on the other hand, if you're going to pay your employee for 40 hours a week, whether they're actually working on somebody else's car or not, you might have them sweeping the floor sometimes or doing book work or something like that, right? Okay, if that's the case, then they'd come over here and you just list them as a full-time employee working 40 hours. But if you're paying them based on, it's kind of the old piecework thing. If you're paying them strictly based on what they're doing in their bay, and what they're, the customers that they're working on, you're paying them $20 less than what your shop rate is, then that's what you would put in there. And then again, you'd come down and you just put in the number of hours. It's probably going to be tough to average the 40 hours a week, but probably wouldn't be out of line to do 35 hours a week. Oops, but that's per week. I got to take that times 4, right? So that's 120, 140, maybe 150, right? Okay, not quite full time. It gets you pretty close. Okay, and you can stretch that all the way across there, right? Okay, to make that fairly consistent. Make it fairly easy. So, another way that we can look at actually payroll in that sense. So, trying to think again, if you've got something, like I said, a hardware store, you've got another clothing store, maybe whatever the case is. Geez, I'm getting all kinds of emails making noise. I apologize, but you might have to combine things. You might have to say nuts and bolts or some things like that. And, and just kind of combine them and figure out some averages. If you've got something more complex than that and you're having some problems with it, get a hold of me. Again, I've expanded this, I think, for one person. It's pretty difficult, but we could probably figure out a way to expand it. I can tell you, that when it comes to it, the bottom line down here, this bottom right-hand corner, is going to be what's important. Again, I want you to do the research, so I want this to be kind of as accurate as possible. But this is what's going to be the important number, right? That's what our total margin is. Mine's kind of low right now. I mean, based on what I have up here, I wouldn't be making any money because I'm going to have operating expenses and whatnot coming out of this. But this is kind of the number that we need to focus on, and you need to kind of take a look at it and say, is that realistic? And it might be the total sales that you'd look at, right? Cost of goods, sure, and and those two numbers there might be the two that are really most important, that you just got to kind of focus on and make sure that you're kind of in the realm. There's a very good chance this happens often, so don't be surprised though. You'll start working on your operating expenses. You got your payroll in there. You'll work on your operating expenses, and you'll get those kind of plugged in, and it looks realistic. And you'll come back or at the bottom line, you'll look at the income statement then and say, "Oh crap, I'm not making any money. I'm actually losing money," and it gets worse year after year. Well, then we got a problem. Then we might have to come back here and do some revisions. Very, very common. So don't fret about it right now. Just be aware and be attuned to that we might have to come back and do some revisions. The opposites happen probably as often as anything. You'll get done with this, and then you go do the operating expenses, and you come up with the income statement, and it shows that you're making $747,000 in the first year. And often I'll scratch my head then and say, that might be a little optimistic, and that's probably what I'd put in my comments to you. And so sometimes you got to come back then and adjust it the other way as well. So be a little bit cognizant about that, and again, do a little research, but try to make this as realistic as possible. If you know somebody, if you're doing the auto shop and you know somebody that's in that business in Timbuktu or wherever they happen to be, call them up and say, hey, give me a rough idea. Can you give me a range? I know you probably don't want to disclose all your finances, but would it be unreasonable that I might do, per bay $250,000 gross? There's your starting point, right? And so that's kind of what you'd gun for here. You might get some more information about the cost of goods sold. Again, the parts thing. If I'm doing 250, how much of that's in parts? How much of that's in labor? Those types of questions, you might be able to ask that would help you fine tune this a little bit. So mess around with it, do some research, plug it in, see what it looks like. Don't be overly concerned about it at this point. I'd be concerned if you think you're way off. Obviously, you kind of want to go back and make something that looks a little bit more realistic. But we can and probably will, in most cases, come back and adjust this a little bit. So be cognizant of that, and we'll be just fine. I will sign off.